My name's Glen Brumbaugh, and I support the IBM MQ and Message Broker products. Message Brokers had a number of names, so Message Broker, Integration Bus, ACE, all the same product. I've been working with IBM for way too many years, back all the way to the 1970s, but my experience with MQ began essentially with the initial release of the product. I was part of the IBM BEST team, Business Enterprise Solutions team, that supported the initial rollout of MQ. Back at that time, people would ask me how to spell MQ, and I would say MQ. Customers didn't understand the technology, and so we were helping in pre-sales and enterprise consulting, solutions, architecture, installation, configuration, programming, pretty much from start to finish on that product. Hard to admit it, but maybe it's 30 years in MQ and 20 to 25 years in the MQ ecosystem at this point. Now I'm an Origina Global IBM Expert for MQ and Message Broker. Well, products, as you mentioned, are pretty stable. So they've been running a long time, and those aren't really the issues. The biggest challenges we see, when I started with MQ, I read every manual cover to cover. I executed every command. We invested maybe a year of personal time into understanding the product, trying it out in the labs, because we had to be pretty bulletproof before we got in front of customers. As the products matured, people need less and less of that depth to be able to use it on a day-to-day basis. So if you think the product's been around 30 years, there aren't many MQ engineers who've been in place at a customer for 30 years on that product and understand it all. In fact, they've left, their predecessors have left, their predecessors have left, and the poor folks now who have it have a more narrow view. They didn't design the systems, they didn't implement them, they may not know all the features as well. So we see a lot of times a large gap between the features that are being used and the features that the customer's already paid for but are not exploiting. Security, capacity, lots of examples of that. Some of the product packaging where you may have bought MQ, for instance, comes in a variety of packages. You may have bought MQ Advanced, which means you have some other products bundled with it that you could be using and may or may not be aware of them. So we see a lot of opportunity out there for customers to leverage the investment they've already made. I'll give you two very different examples. In one case, we had a priority one incident with a major customer, and MQ is a messaging product. So essentially, it's a communications layer product, which means it's in the middle of things. And being in the middle of things, you're often trying to trace where the problem is. There's only one problem in MQ. Somebody says, I didn't get my mail. Then the question is, why? You know, was it the post office that lost it? Did it never get sent? Where's the problem resolved? So you end up debugging this kind of solution. And we had a number of technologies involved. We ended up getting a significant number of GIEs involved across multiple disciplines. I was called in later in the problem when people realized there was the MQ component to look at. I was actually out sailing, and I had to sail my sailboat close to the shore and anchor so I could rig up communications and work on my laptop. And we spent, I think I was on that war room 8 to 10 hours. I mean, we had a whole team working until we resolved the problem. So that was a great example, I think, of Origina teamwork, and the customer doesn't see all that, but behind the scenes, we just reach out to one another and escalate and say, oh, I need an expert on this platform. Can they get in and look at this for me proactively? The second incident was a customer said, hey, I'm losing MQ data. And I thought to myself, no, you're not. MQ doesn't lose data. But as we researched it, they were in fact losing data. And so we thought, well, that's very interesting. And we went through a series of traces of where's it coming from, what's happening, and we ultimately came to the solution that this can't be happening. MQ had it here, it sent it here, your settings are this, and therefore MQ shouldn't lose it, but in fact it did lose it. What's the issue? And in digging a little deeper, I said, well, this can't happen. What are your settings on some of these property files? And it turned out that the customer had said, without getting too technical, if I get too much data, just throw some away. And the ultimate response to that was, well, the system is working as designed because you said to throw away data. If you overflowed this, you might want to consider changing this global parameter that you set. And the customer was reluctant to do that in that case, but at least we tracked it down to this is the problem, this is causing your problem, and this is what you need to do to fix it. And my experience in onboarding has been quite varied because our customers are varied. And the people supporting the IBM software at our customers are very different customer to customer. And so some customers, for instance, if you take MQ, they might have MQ administrators that had been MQ people for 10 or 15 years and were really very highly skilled. And you might have another customer that basically just outsourced all their MQ, and they have a whole bunch of brand new people who know very little about that customer. And very different audiences. But it really makes no difference from my perspective as a GIE or from Origina's perspective, because we're providing software support to whomever initiates the call. So when we're onboarding, it's sort of, who are you? What do you need? How much do you know about your infrastructure? So we can understand how best to support you. And that's our job, is to make you successful, whether you're a third-party support person, whether you're directly on our customer's payroll. It makes no difference to us. The only goal is that you're successful with the IBM software. Individuals open tickets, and in general, for instance, I'll be a primary for a customer, so most of the tickets get routed to me. Some could go to a secondary. But we work as a team, and ultimately the customer kind of understands that when they open a ticket, they're going to get the same level of service no matter who services the ticket. And if we only deal through email kind of interactions, the customer is getting more of a relationship with Origina, and are we solving their problems or not? As we get to know individuals within the customers, we can tailor our responses to their skill sets. For instance, if I'm dealing with a more junior customer, I'll give them execute the following commands. If I'm dealing with a more experienced customer, I might just say, get this done. Check security for this user ID. And assume they know how to do that. A more junior person, I might say, execute the following commands, let me know what the results are, and then I'll give you the next thing to do. So I think that we build up a relationship kind of step by step with the individuals that are supporting the product on their side, and they get to know us over time. A lot of times, this is becoming more frequent, where customers will have a more time-pressing issue, and they'll say, we need to get on a call. Can you get on a call? And it's like, sure. This last week, Matsami, who's an MQ GIE out of South Africa, and is a backup to me on a lot of US customers, because he's in a different time zone, 6 hours different, wanted to get on a call with Mats and I, and so you basically say, hey, Mats, when are you available? When can I meet? When the customer meet, help desk kind of coordinates all this, and we get a meeting up, and we get going. And then we make a little more personal contact on those kind of calls with the customer, because you get a much more back and forth rather than email responses, which are a little more formalistic or more procedural in nature. So I think over time those relationships develop, and we learn how to best work with the people, and they seem to develop confidence and open more tickets, actually. So I guess that's a good thing. The answer is the result of a combination of forces that all of our customers feel. And that's because this is what's happening in the marketplace. And the marketplace is driving IT costs down. And that's kind of driven our skill sets and staffing into a mix that, rather than having lots of independent specialists, we tend to have more generalists now whose skill sets are broader and shallower necessarily, because they're working on a broader variety of tasks. And so the marketplace has forced the customers into staffing to support what I'll call an 80-20 rule, where 80% of the time you're using 20% of the product. So our customers are optimizing to supporting that 80%. And you don't need a world expert to turn something on. Go over and flip the light switch on, right? If the lights don't come on, now you need an electrician. And so what I see in a lot of customers is this gap I'd mentioned earlier between the potentials of the product and what they're getting out of it. And it's partly in a case of, we optimized this 10, 15 years ago, and we really haven't looked at it since. Are we using these things correctly? Do the applications that are exploiting this software know all the potentials, because the folks supporting the software are not working as closely with the applications anymore? Which, when we introduce MQ or message broker or technology like that, initially the infrastructure and the application groups are working very closely together to introduce this new, essentially, computing platform. And over time, those groups drift apart for various reasons, in part because of security, separation of duties, etc. But sometimes the application folks need to be refreshed on, there are capabilities here that could be exploited and things that maybe need to review. The security you set place in 10 years ago, has been updated, and you're not taking advantage of some of the new features, as an example. Or the performance testing hasn't been done in a while. Do you need to know what your capacity is? So I think that the gap that most of our customers that I see is they're just not exploiting the product to the capabilities, even though they've already paid for it. So that's an opportunity to get more value for an investment they've already made.